It is a tricky endeavor to both believe that mortals are not beholden to free will, while also believing in the phenomenon of precognition. Taking for granted that one believes in magic, the ability to see into the future and tell fortunes should seem an impossible task if one also believes that us mortal souls are not bound by fate. And yet, millions of souls across the world have tried for years to balance this contradiction in their philosophies. You know me, dear guest. You've seen me dabble in the tarot and consult my augurs. Then am I not some staunch opponent to free will? Am I one who truly believes in an existence bound in the ever-present prison known as destiny? What is the validity in a fortune told if one believes that they have the ability to change the future? What is the hope in free will in the face of such overwhelming opposition? You know what? Totally ignore me. I was making hurricanes and these bitches are so fruity, happy pride, that I totally forgot there's alcohol in them. Was I talking about the intrinsic nature of fate again? I'm such a goose, y'all. Speaking of hurricanes, did you know that there's actually a ghost down in South Carolina that can predict whenever a tropical storm is going to come? Full circle. His name is the Gray Man of Pawleys Island, and he'll be the topic of tonight's discussion. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't have a blender. I can't really call this a hurricane. It's kind of just like a rum screwdriver with extra fruit in it. I'm gonna call it the tropical storm. This one's almost empty. Let's go make some new ones. I think you'll like them quite nicely. They're quite summary. And by that, I don't just mean a short synopsis to a story. That joke could have been better. Cue the theme song music. Welcome to the Foxhole and Foxxo Esoterica. I promise I was sober when I wrote this. Welcome back to Foxxo Esoterica, the paranormal drunk comedy YouTube channel that's hitting Myrtle Beach, or somewhere about 15 miles south as the crow flies. Actually, I've never been to Myrtle Beach before, but there are a couple of swamp foxes in my family that live down south that far, and I hear nice things. The joke is that Swamp Fox is a roller coaster. To those who haven't taken the time to read the title of this video yet, tonight's episode will pertain to the Gray Man of Pawleys Island, one of the most famous ghost stories to come out of the state of South Carolina. For centuries, this gray-suited specter wandered mysteriously along the banks of the Atlantic, and it is rumored that his presence indicates the coming of hurricanes, even before meteorologists are able to accurately source such information. But before I get into the nitty-gritty, you know what? I really have nothing in the lieu of housekeeping, so allow us to skip right to the nitty-gritty. We're keeping it simple tonight, and are only really going to be cracking open the Irimabo Phantasma series, Ghost Stories. And as I mentioned in the cold open, we're drinking tropical storms this evening. It's like a screwdriver, but with rum. And it's like a hurricane, but I don't have a blender. I guess if you're curious, the recipe for this is 2 parts dark rum, 2 parts light rum. Oh my god, I'm going to die. 2 parts orange juice, 1 part passion fruit juice, which thankfully is actually not too inconvenient to find in Germany. 1 part banana juice, which isn't actually a part of the original recipe. I just saw it for €1 and it looked fun. Lime juice, and I used an invisibility potion. Ooh, witchcraft. But there's grenadine in this, and a maraschino cherry, and an orange peel. Rest assured, this is an authentic recreation of a hurricane, tropical storm, without a blender, and I wasn't just lazy about forgetting those ingredients. The legend of the Gray Man begins in 1822, the last year that the man in question could consider himself alive. Though his name has been lost to the legend, it is commonly told that he was an affianced sailor who had just dropped anchor in Charleston, making plans to move more than a marathon's length to Pawleys Island up north, in order to meet with his fiancée. The man traveled on horseback, but still thought it prudent to seek out a shortcut, taking a trek through the thick marshes of the low country. This would prove to be the man's folly, for when his horse stepped into the particularly vacuum-inducing pluff mud of the area, It threw the man, who proceeded to sink into the pluff mud, sinking down as if it were quicksand. This accident would claim his life. The man's fiancée was stricken with a particularly potent grief and took to pacing the shores of Pawleys Island in meditation. That is, until one day, when the fiancée would stumble across a miracle. It was her sailor, walking amongst the living once more. She didn't even consider his new all-gray wardrobe to indicate anything out of the ordinary. That is, until her senses returned as she approached the fiancé to ask further questions. The sugary powder of hope turned to bitter ash, especially considering that his dead body was, indeed, recovered. And she began to ask the man why he dwelt once more in the waking world. "Are you not passed away?" she'd ask. "How could you possibly be here, my love?" But the man, in a conversational haze not unlike dementia, only spoke one warning. "Leave. Get out. A storm is coming." And in the blink of an eye, the gray man would vanish from sight. The woman, with nerves a great deal more steeled than most folks, didn't panic, nor did she ignore the warning. She told her family, and the group took a trip inland to avoid the hypothetical storm. And sure enough, the notorious hurricane of 1822 would reach the shores of South Carolina's low country and claim the lives of over 300 people, possibly more. It even nearly wiped a burgeoning Myrtle Beach from the map. The woman and her family would return after the storm subsided and discover that their home was the only property left undamaged in the entire community. Ever since, the mysterious gray man of Pawleys Island is said to roam the Atlantic shores, a grim portent for violent hurricanes in the area. And rest assured, hurricanes of the 19th and 20th centuries are far from the only storms in which the gray man has been spotted. Hurricane Ian, in 2022, serves as the most recent storm in which the gray man has warned about. But before we dive in deeper into the story, as well as variations on the legend, rest assured there are other versions. It's time to bring up my sources. My sources tonight are: I used onlypawleys.com, the book The Return of the Gray Man, written by Julian Stevenson Bolick, the book South Carolina Ghosts from the Coast to the Mountain by Nancy Roberts, the article Hurricanes, Histories, and Hauntings on the University of South Carolina's website, written by Alexis Watts, the YouTube series/channel Ghost Guys Go, run by Billy and Jim McClency, and the article Vacationing Couple Photographs Supposed Gray Man Ghost on SC Beach, written by Aaron Ladd on WMBF's website. Oh, there's more. The article, I memorized this script. The article Legends of Pawleys Island, written by Aaron Z. Bass, or Bass, on the Deep South Magazine's website. The article The Gray Man of Pawleys Island, written by Jake Carter on the website anomalien.com. The article Who is the Gray Man? Get to know hurricane season's friendliest ghost, written by Elizabeth Hutchinson Hicklin on Gardens and Guns website. And finally, I remain supporting Wikipedia. Ripping that Wikipedia. I should get like a Wikipedia tie or something. Wikipedia tie. Or like a hat. Or even a shirt. Oh, you know what? That's just the Wikipedia article for tie. Shopping. Tie rack. You know what? You just put Wikipedia in the search bar and you will never get any other website. Wikipedia. It's online and it's good. Now, I know I'm the big take the first 20 minutes of the episode to over-explain relevant history guy, but I kind of left y'all in the dark as to how these stories play out. So allow me to actually start with an anecdote that actually explains how these hauntings play out. You know, when you're not actively engaged with the ghost in question. One of the most popular Gray Man sightings was reported by Pawleys Island locals, Jim and Clara Moore. It's probably the most popular because they were interviewed for the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, but it's fairly ubiquitous in regards to how these sightings usually go. The couple were going for a morning stroll on the island's beach on September 21st, 1989. The beach was almost entirely devoid of people, until eventually, the Moores did find a single man going for a walk in the distance. There are no leads buried here. The man was dressed in gray. 19th century pant hat and jacket 19th century pant hat and jacket combination. The sort of clothes one would associate with a fisherman, complete with a trench coat. Why do I write sentences like that? 19th century pant hat and jacket combination. Bro, I learned enough vocal warm-up tongue twisters in college. I am making no friends by inventing new ones. Now at first, the Moores didn't clock the man as a spirit from beyond the veil. and were satisfied with wishing the man a simple, "Have a nice day," until the gray-suited figure proceeded to vanish as soon as he got near enough. It was at that point that Jim and Clara Moore knew exactly what this spirit was warning about, and they were already packing for a trip inland by the time that the National Weather Service issued a hurricane warning for Hurricane Hugo. And sure enough, when the storm passed, the Moores returned home and discovered that their Pawleys Island house had remained almost entirely intact, just like the Gray Man's fiance's house in 1822.
Now, the Gray Man does get a little bit chattier in other stories than he did with Jim and Clara, but this story does bring up a few interesting recurring traits. One, it is thought by some that those who the Gray Man visits specifically find their homes spared after the hurricane peters out. And on the opposite end of that, it is thought that if you scoff at the Gray Man, you'll definitely find your property broken, but I haven't found any named specific examples of that. Additionally, the National Weather Service is able to get their reports and warnings out 3 days ahead of time in contemporary times, which kind of makes this hurricane predicting ghost a little bit moot, but it is often reported that the Gray Man appears a couple days before even the National Weather Service gets their warning out, so it's good to see that, like, ghosts and supernatural occurrences haven't been rendered completely useless by modern technology just yet. Now it's history time.
Regardless of the authenticity of the legend's details, it's easy to say that the hurricane of 1822 is the definite starting point of the legend part of this legend. So there isn't too much merit into looking into the entire history of South Carolina. There is a bit of merit to discussing Pawleys Island, though, because sometimes the Gray Man isn't a sailor. One of the most notable variations of the story involves George Pawley, one of the sons of Percival Pawley, the first European to develop a plantation in the area after he received a grant from the government. George Pawley took it a step further and developed an entire beach resort on the island sometime in the 1700s.
Now, it is tricky to find the exact date in which Pawleys Island was founded for reasons I'll get to later, but it is speculated that this was one of the first resorts in American history, and even George Washington was said to stay there a few times. Pawleys Island's main clientele were southern aristocratic plantation-owning people who wanted to get away from the muggy, mosquito-infested hot summers found in South Carolina's inland areas and escape to the seaside for a little bit. I would not get too excited about the resort part of this because keep in mind that these are plantation owners and slavery existed, and the enslaved people were definitely not invited to this area.
To bring the point full circle, some legends state that George Pawley perished in the hurricane of 1822, and that it was he who manifested as the Gray Man. But there exists a lack of obituarial information online, so I cannot confirm how factual this is.
I actually found a South Carolina plantation database, but it stated that George Pawley was actually Percival's father, and that he died in 1773. So there exists enough dubiousness for me to refute the George Pawley Gray Man connection.
The third most popular Gray Man theory is that the ghost was a Confederate soldier in the American Civil War, hence the gray uniform, which actually conveniently brings me to my next historical point. A lot of the records regarding Pawleys Island were lost in the Civil War, and considering the fact that the Pawleys and other local wealthy families supported the Confederate side, they lost a lot of the property as a result of being financial backers of a losing side in a war. The result/plantation amalgamation melted away into a community, still known as Pawleys Island. Considering the marshy environment, the newly formed community grew an inconceivable amount of rice as their main crop, though this also kind of happened before the Civil War. It was after the war that northern businessmen bought a lot of the land to cut lumber, and then they also soft rebooted the resort vibe a little. The area retains its usage as a vacation destination with bookable resort homes. As of 2023, only 132 people actually live there still.
But yes, I was talking about the Gray Man as a Confederate soldier, a theory that only works if you forget that the hurricane of 1822 happened before the Confederacy even existed.
Now, in the interest of fairness, while this theory also kind of overrides the sailor plus sailor's fiance arc, she was kind of the only actual witness during the hurricane of 1822. But I didn't want to besmirch this ghost's good name by insinuating that he was a Confederate. This story involves a Southern family and their Confederate soldier son, who allegedly receives news that a violent storm was headed south towards South Carolina, and takes it upon himself to ride hard and fast as possible to warn his family. The soldier makes it in time to give his warning, and then rides off. However, a few days later, the family receives a telegram that stated that the son had been killed in battle much earlier. It was, indeed, the son's ghost that made the ride to warn them.
Can somebody say plot hole alert? I'm a hater when it comes to this theory, so...
The last prominent theory regards an entrepreneur by the name of Plowden C.J. Weston, who built and managed the Pelican Inn at Pawleys Island, a business built in 1840 that operates to this day. Weston didn't pass away in any dramatic fashion, but it is thought that his immense care for the community prompted him to stick around in the afterlife to warn folks about hurricanes.
Now, I'm a big fan of having dates and names attached to these stories. It's what takes a story from an urban legend to something I can talk about comfortably on this podcast, because, let's be honest. If the Hookman had something like, me and my honey were driving up to Lover's Lane on September 28th, 1978, between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m. When we heard her rapping out the window, it would sound a little bit more plausible,
And with the Gray Man, the legend almost always conveniently begins in 1822. But one must remember, there was also a really historically important hurricane that took place that year, and it's really easy to retroactively swoop in and attach the Gray Man to a historically important hurricane. And so, it is important to note that the first year that the Gray Man was mentioned in print was 1946, which kind of allows for all of the story's variations to be canonically possible, but no one can convince me that he was a Confederate.
The first written account of the Gray Man was in Waccamaw Plantations, a book written by Julian Stevenson Bolick in the year 1946. It is a book that costs $200 to buy and isn't available digitally, so I did not read it. But I did read Julian Stevenson Bolick's other book, The Return of the Gray Man, written in 1961, which was available online.
Bolick would write sporadically on the Gray Man in most of their writings, and even though The Return of the Gray Man isn't 100% just about the Gray Man, this book pretty much encapsulates the entirety of their research.
I'm gonna be real with you, I could not find Bolick's gender.
Despite the fact that Bolick's writings stand as the first written reference to the Gray Man, it's insinuated that folks in South Carolina had been talking about him for a while, with a considerable flap of sightings taking place before the hurricane of 1898. Bolick isn't committed to saying that the Gray Man was Percival Pawley or a love-struck sailor, but they do add a fifth theory that states that the Gray Man was a local guy that died in a hurricane. Can't believe that's the fifth most common theory. That seems like the most obvious one. One other notable addition to this story, in regards to the sailor quicksand arc, is the fact that the sailor and his fiancée were cousins. Bolick speculates that the fiancée in question was an aristocratic lady who had many, many suitors, often at the invitation of her parents, but the still unnamed fiancé was like, nah, you know who I really want to marry? It's my cousin. It's also speculated that he wasn't actually a sailor, but he was sent overseas to air quotes, study, and was also to not spend any time near his cousin as much as possible. We also veer a little bit into theory number 6 territory, though, because in some renditions of this cousin dating arc, this actually took place in the Revolutionary War era, and that the cousin died in a duel in France. I am going to need you to bear with me, because this is the least craziest part of this story. The young lady ends up marrying someone else, then starts a family on Pawleys Island. The Revolutionary War is going on, and one night a storm comes. Out wandering the shores is a lone black man who claims to be a slave to someone who is fighting the war. The woman invites the man to stay at their home so he can wait out the storm, and then the man proceeds to stand up suddenly, have his face turn into a vivid red, tomato red color, scream something unintelligible to the woman, and run off into the storm. The woman faints, but not before noticing that the man's face had actually melted and transformed once again. It was actually her dead cousin all along. He disappears into the storm and is never seen again.
And technically, this is the first account of the Gray Man legend. Allegedly. So everybody give it up to theory number 6. What the fuck?
So after reading that section, I am not entirely certain how much of Bolick's reporting I want to dwell on in my notes. But other Gray Man lore details that get brought up are the fact that he often appears like a normal, dressed in gray dude in the distance, but when you approach, you notice he's faceless. Additionally, he shows up in the late afternoon, near dusk, or the early morning, near dawn. Though that's not really consistent, I guess, considering other sightings that come up later. Also, Bolick adds an anecdote in theory number 1, the not-sailor incest arc, where the sailor also had a slave travel with him, and that's how the report of the sailor's death got made, because that man survived to tell the tale. Also, Bolick really likes bringing up slavery in a maybe slavery was cool fashion, which is, not great, especially considering they were writing books in the 1960s,
I was not expecting to lose my mind this much at this book, but I turned to the page and the next chapter was titled Was the Gray Man and Enoch Arden? What the fuck does that mean?
So, there aren't any dates or names attached to this story as per usual, but it took place before the Civil War. A guy was vibing and doing historical resort stuff on the island, and then was fishing, and then fell asleep while he was fishing, and then he had a weird dream where he was at some random person's wedding, and a man dressed in a gray uniform arrived on horseback and then said nothing, and then rode off towards Pawleys Island. Strangely enough, the bride started crying and calling after him, and then chasing him, and then so did the entire wedding procession. To clarify, still a dream. The nameless narrator man woke up, but it was night now, and then he just sort of straight up saw the bride and groom for real. They were just hanging out there in their wedding attire. Notably, the gray man was missing. Then, the bride and groom disappeared. There were ghosts. Some people report seeing the bride and groom combo. The book points out rather specifically that mostly only slaves saw the couple, and it was other people that saw the gray man. But apparently, one nameless old guy recalls an account of these 3 childhood friends who grew up to form a love triangle. The gray uniformed man then went to the military and, air quotes, died in a shipwreck. So the woman was like, that makes choosing who to marry very easy. And then, just like the Michael Bay Pearl Harbor movie, spoilers, skip ahead 10 seconds if you care and haven't seen that movie, the gray uniformed man didn't actually die and showed up at the wedding and was like, welp, time to drown, I guess. But because the bride kind of wanted to be with him, she also decided to drown. And because the cuckold left at the altar was like, damn, I just got cucked, he also drowned.
Everybody give it up for theory number 7. Also, I had to Google it, but Enoch Arden is a narrative poem written by Lord Alfred Tennyson in 1864. You'll never guess what Michael Bay plot gets played out in it.
I've talked about this book for far too long. Let's look at any other source.
Also, theory number 8. Some people believe that the Gray Man of Pawleys Island is actually, secretly, Blackbeard. I actually wanted to look this one up because I could not fathom how anybody came to that conclusion. I know that Blackbeard did a few ghosty things in his day, float around his ship when he got killed, but no, I think this one's just made up. People were just lying recreationally.
Interestingly enough, it is around the same-ish 50s, 60s time period, in congruence with Bolick's career, that a major flop of gray man sightings took off. Hurricane Hazel, which wreaked havoc in 1954, was a storm devastating enough to prompt the retirement of the name Hazel from the list of storm names after it subsided. Which is interesting to note, because 1953 was the first year that the World Meteorological Organization and the U.S. National Weather Service started naming hurricanes.
Tangent, 1950 was actually the first year that they decided to categorically give every hurricane a name, and they started by using the phonetic alphabet, i.e. Alpha, Baker, Charlie. And then in 1953, they ran out of names. Don't know why they thought that would last. So then it was that year that they started to give hurricanes girls' names, because, women. And it wasn't until 1979 that they actually started to give hurricanes boys' names.
Back to the story at hand, though. Hurricane Hazel led to over 500 deaths, destroyed half of the Caribbean coffee and cacao crop, and even made it so far inland as to lay particularly potent destruction to the Canadian city of Toronto as an extratropical storm. To come full circle, Hazel hit South Carolina in early October and hit the state hard. But a few locals were savvy enough to know that when a mysterious gray man was out and about, the time for evacuation was nigh. A man by the name of Bill Collins was honeymooning on the island with his new wife, who chose to remain anonymous. One night, the couple received a strange visitor knocking at their door at a particularly strange hour. The man was dressed in gray clothing, as is the case with most sightings, but Colin was able to notice a few more details. His clothes, and especially his gray fisherman hat, were noticeably wrinkly, and the man smelled specifically of briny salt water. He told the couple that he was with the Red Cross, another new detail, and that they should leave as possible out of fear for a storm. And then, he vanished without a trace. The frightened couple heeded the warning and were spared from the yet-to-be-developed Hurricane Hazel's full fury.
Also, I'd be remiss if I... Zuma the Puma, everybody! Zuma the Puma! Do you have anything you want to say? Do you want to show up in the video?
What's the video about again?
Gray Man of Pawleys Island. The hurricane predicting ghosts.
That cool thing is just a FEMA guy that just shows up at people's places and tells them there's a storm coming, and these people were on drugs and were drunk.
How far into the story am I? Yeah, I don't know. I think we covered that part. Zuma the Puma, everybody. Everybody give him an applause. What was I going to say? Okay, so I'd be completely remiss if I didn't bring up that Julian Stevenson Bolick also mentioned that people saw the gray man of Pawleys Island before the Hurricane Hazel. Just kidding. I wouldn't even be remotely remiss if I forgot to mention Julian Stevenson Bolick. I'd go so far as to say that I'm feeling completely miss right now. Gender fluid Forseti arc. Also, damn it, I actually did bring up Julian Stevenson Bolick. I'm genuinely remiss now.
The Honeymooner's story is the only one to survive the internet as of 2023 when it comes to gray man sightings of 1954. Outside of Bill Collins' anecdote, the articles online don't really go past saying, and then the locals saw the gray man walking out on the beach until the very day Hurricane Hazel hit. But such is the nature of ghost stories, names are a rare treat.
One of the other stories to survive the internet pertains to the Lakakati family in 1893. Refer to the spelling and not the pronunciation. And though we don't actually have any first names of family members, it is interesting to note that this hurricane was prolific enough to actually get a title of its own before the National Weather Service swooped in 1950.
The Sea Islands hurricane of 1893 claimed over 1,000 lives and is one of the deadliest in South Carolina's history, with hurricanes Hazel, Hugo, and Gracie following close behind. This story plays out much the same as the Bill Collins story. The Lakakoti family spends a peaceful retreat at their Pawleys Island home. The gray man shows up at night, dressed in his fisherman's attire, only this time, he says nothing. He simply vanished right away. Evidently, the legend's lore was going strong even in 1893 because the family immediately clocked the gray-cloaked figure as the hurricane oracle, and as such, they avoided the brunt of the Sea Islands hurricane after evacuating.
This next anecdote comes to us from Nancy Roberts, from her book South Carolina Ghosts from the Coast to the Mountain, first published in 1983.
This story concerns Hurricane Gracie, which I brought up earlier, just very recently earlier, as one of South Carolina's deadliest. A woman by the name of Jacqueline Andrews was staying at her parents' summer home in Pawleys Island in October when the tourism season had wrapped up, to spend some time to herself in peace. She took to walking on the beach often and found it to be quite relaxing until one evening when she noticed a figure maybe 300 feet behind her, following intently. She paid him no mind until she noticed that the figure was intentionally walking towards her as quickly as possible. When she ran, so did the figure. The chase went on until Jacqueline was able to reach her parents' home, whereupon she saw the figure, a man dressed in gray, standing on top of a dune, watching her. A strange mist then rolled in, and the man vanished amidst it. Throughout the night, a heavy storm began to roll in, and at this point, Jackie was unaware regarding the significance of a gray man's sighting. Thoughts of hurricanes churned at the back of her mind, but she figured that if it were indeed a hurricane, the National Weather Service would say something on the radio, so she returned to sleep. That is, until a rapping came upon Jacqueline's window. It was the same man as earlier, dressed in gray. Jackie felt herself become overwhelmed with panic, but the man, persistent in his pursuits, warned Jackie that the storm was going to grow far worse and that she should leave the island immediately. The man didn't vanish outright, but instead stayed until he had convinced Jackie that she had to leave. In her tired grogginess, she agreed, and the man simply walked off, without vanishing. It was around 4 a.m. when Jackie decided to make the drive back to her apartment in Charleston, avoiding the full brunt of the devastating Hurricane Gracie. For the longest time, she simply assumed that the man was a worker for the National Weather Service and was simply extremely committed to getting the evacuation message out. It wasn't until Jackie Andrews returned to Pawleys Island later, telling her story, that she would learn the tale of the gray man. The likelihood that she herself had an encounter with the paranormal growing quite steadily.
Also, we got video, baby. We got video and we got picture. This is a ghost that has been appearing in the modern times, so I think it's high time we start talking about some modern sightings.
The first anecdote I want to bring up features a video on YouTube, footage caught by paranormal investigators and brothers, I think, Bill and Jim McClency, of the Ghost Guys Go group, who set up a camera during Hurricane Florence in 2018. This video focuses on a pier and picks up a transparent apparition pacing around the end. This time, not warning anyone of the ongoing storm, simply manifesting of its own accord.
They also made a video where they were doing bits and admitting that the footage was fake, but then they were just like, psych, this random fish slap reaction video we used, that's fake. our Gray Man video is real, got ya, and then they made a react video to people reacting to their footage video, and then they were just like, fuck the haters. Love it. This is a tangent, but the YouTube channel description, I have it written here, says, "We are Jim and Billy McClency, real-life professional ghosters. We handle all manner of supernatural ghost, ghoul, spirit, specter, demon, devil, goblin, phantom, poltergeist, raccoon, shadows, banshees, demon, ghost, kelpie, the word for ghost synonym that starts with S, and all other ethereal and corporeal quadridimensional beings. We're gonna review ghosts, answer your dumb questions, you amateurs, teach you about conspiracy facts, and all other assortments of weird, spooky, but real videos. You can trust our words because we went to Harvard, Yale, Brown, Gold, Green, NASA, and ESPCI, and have visited all realms above the 300 to 400 haunted factor. Our scale we invented, patent pending. I bring this up because I would like to announce that I am canceling my YouTube channel. I am deleting all of the videos. I am never going to match this level of excellence, and I should let the professionals work. I genuinely love this channel so much. Oh, my candles died.
Bits aside, I find this video to be interesting, if it's real, because it hypothetically shows that the Gray Man isn't just some presence that shows up to people to warn them of a coming disaster. He's just a normal ghost with a meteorological hobby. In theory. Also, some sources say that this is footage from Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina, but despite actually having lived in North Carolina once, I am not a Carolinian pier expert, so I can't say. Use your own judgment here.
There was another video, taken in 2018 by a man named Johnny Cobb, who was vacationing with a group. This was before anybody knew that Hurricane Florence was on the horizon and forming across the Atlantic Ocean.
It is also definitely confirmed that this photograph was taken at a pier near Cherry Grove, which is near Myrtle Beach, so it's tricky to say if this is a Gray Man of Pawleys Island sighting, considering a noticeable lack of Pawleys Island, or just another ghost currently indulging in a beach episode arc. Notably, Cobb mentions that he never saw the spirit himself, it only manifested in the photograph. Before Hurricane Ian hit in 2022, another photograph was taken of a mysterious figure roaming the Pawleys Island beaches. This one comes courtesy of someone named Latricia Graham, but the sighting doesn't really go past seeing the Gray Man before a hurricane hits. As I mentioned before, outside of these anecdotes and a few others that I simply haven't found yet, names are a rare treat, but it's to be assumed that there are dozens and dozens of similar sightings reported by locals. They've just chosen to remain anonymous, or their names have been lost to the internet. He's a relatively simple ghost when you pare down the anecdotes to their core. The Gray Man is a forlorn spirit dedicated to warning folks about storms and such. He's even looked up to as a benevolent spirit to the folks down in South Carolina. Sure, his portents aren't really welcome, but his presence is rarely regarded with fear if people are familiar with the story. And indeed, I really love this story. I have a soft spot for ghosts that find themselves beloved by a community, as opposed to feared and made an urban legend out of. And it warms my heart that he continues his work to this very day. So I believe that constitutes a well-covered story. Let's jump into the conclusions and prepare yourself for some non-scientific discourse.
Alright, I'm breaking out the glasses again. Let me live. Do I believe that the ghost of the Gray Man of Pawleys Island exists? Yes, I know that ever since I started the YouTube series, I keep tackling stories that I don't actually believe in, so I'm glad to say that I am not a skeptic. I really believe that the Gray Man exists. However, I also believe in zero of the backstories. I don't even believe in the original Sailor Fiancé arc, let alone the Confederate arc, or the one where he was pretending to be a slave and also fell in love with his cousin. I'm gonna be real. Remember earlier when I said that some people believe that the Gray Man was a sailor or fisherman that died at sea in a hurricane? I don't even care if Julian Stevenson Bolick was the first person to mention it. It's the Occam's Razor arc, and that's the one that won me over so far. All the others reek of urban legendhood that gets regurgitated over time and cemented when the internet rolls around. The Gray Man is an unnamed sailor whose name was lost to history and wants to protect folk from the fate he suffered. For City Hot Take Hour. You know, I wouldn't even claim that he's a tulpa or a ghost manifested into reality by the merit of a lot of people believing in it. Every episode, if I bring up Tulpa, I feel like I gotta explain it, just in case this is somebody's first episode. A, he's pretty accurate when predicting the weather, and that seems outside of the Tulpa's territory. And B, I know he's got a pretty large amount of people believing in him in South Carolina, but he appears in a manner that's very much outside of the established lore. He's described as a fisherman as opposed to a basic soldier or sailor, and that features into zero of the legends. And also he's cool, so boom, I believe he's a residual ghost and he can predict the weather.
I also don't think that he can physically protect homes from hurricanes. There's only 3 or 4 anecdotes I found that feature actual named witnesses that include that detail, and I'm okay in admitting that that's few enough to imply that luck is involved here as opposed to divine intervention. Also, it's interesting to note that the Gray Man is truly one of those legends that actually gets cited to this day. Like, we're talking years after the COVID pandemic started. But also, maybe there's something to the fact that this guy warns against hurricanes, and we really haven't done anything about global warming yet, so...
Why do I believe it? Well, it's happened enough with enough named witnesses, with enough of a regular pattern, and also doesn't have any glaring historical gaps, and also I have fun in my life, and I enjoy believing in things, and I also pull mad bitches, unlike skeptics. So boom. Review corner time. Pawleys Island is sort of a town, sort of an unincorporated community, but according to Google Maps, it is also a tourist attraction, so I shall find my review corner fodder there, though do be warned, there are only 3 reviews.
Sheila Jones writes, "We always vacationed at Pawleys Island every year when my children were younger. My daughter and family now live there. So many fond memories, great restaurants, and gorgeous beaches, and dog-friendly. Checks all my boxes. 5 stars. Steak Rare writes, "Visit in July 2022. It is okay to visit, but not astonishing. 5 stars. There are perhaps haters in the chat." Brenda Phelps writes, "Always beautiful. 5 stars. This review corner was a bit quick. Such is the nature of life sometimes."
So yeah, that's the end of that episode. I'm really glad that I was able to cover a story that I actually believe in. I forgot to write an outro, so this is from the Robert Johnson video. And with that, video over. The next one will be about something entirely unrelated. You can find these videos on YouTube, but you can also find the audio on Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and Spotify if you like. The podcast version of the last episode got like 0 engagement, so I don't know how long I'll be doing that. You can support Foxxo Esoterica on Patreon and Coffee at FORSETIFOX for both, as well as TikTok for at FORSYFOX. All research, recording, editing, and music is done by me, and furry art is done by these artists. Gray Man is real. The Gray Man is real. Do you remember earlier in the video when I was like, rum is half of what this is?